X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is your all-new, all-different X-Men podcast where we rank every story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Zach and Adam.
Hey, Zach, are you excited for like the most amazing episode of our podcast ever?
Adam, I am fire and life incarnate right now and forever. And that's because today... Well, let's go back to what you guys are going to run into this week. This week, Dark Phoenix is going to come out. Is tentatively the last X-Men movie from Fox, as assuming that New Mutants just never comes out forever until the heat death of the universe. Which is the track it's on, as sad as that is. But we decided, in honor of that, to bring in a extra dimensional force, a Phoenix Force of our own, to imbue this episode with so much energy and so much excitement, and we cannot be more excited to have him on here. It is Jay Edidin. Jay, how you doing?
Now I'm kind of worried that whatever I say, it's going to be anticlimactic, but thank you so much for having me on. This is, I'm really, really happy to be here, and also really excited to be talking about not just the Dark Phoenix saga, but some of my actually favorite What If issues.
Really?
All right, that's great.
I'm excited about that. So for people who don't know, and guys, I'm just going to kind of put the cards on the table. If you're listening to our podcast and don't know who Jay Edidin is already, you got like 250 very good other episodes of an X-Men podcast to enjoy. Jay is the co-host of Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men.
Do you want me to do the official patter?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a weekly walk through the ins, outs, retcons, clones, and time travel of comics' greatest superhero soap opera, featuring convoluted continuity, creator interviews, cultural context, and more.
That was
amazing. Been doing this basically nonstop for 5 years, so at this point I can do that in my sleep.
Wow. Well, and Jay, it is awesome to have you here because this is kind of like a monumental deal. Since we started the show, people have been telling us to do Dark Phoenix, and the time has finally arrived. So we definitely appreciate your expertise as we talk about this story and some of the ancillary stuff.
So I'm looking through the rankings and wondering sort of what's in line to potentially be upset today.
A
lot of stuff, I'm going to say.
A lot of stuff, yes. So why don't we just get right into it? Our first story today is The Dark Phoenix Saga by Chris Claremont, John Byrne, and Terry Austin. Terry Orzechowski, Glenn Oliver does some colors in here. I'm looking at my 7th printing. Yes, Chris Hassan, my 7th printing, not my first printing of my trade paperback here, which doesn't include the covers for some reason. That annoys me.
Those are some good covers.
Oh man, yeah. This is good comics, people.
So let's start with what happens, because I was noticing this as I was rereading it. It's broken into 3 real acts. It's the first 3 issues are the X-Men go. They split up to recruit Kitty Pryde and Dazzler, and then Emma Frost shows up in her first appearance, kidnaps everyone. While they go through, and you start to see, Jean, who this is her first time really being back with the team. She was there for the Proteus arc before this, but Jean just kind of going a little bit harder, a little bit heavier than anyone's ever seen her go before. Then it jumps into the Hellfire stuff where the Hellfire Club attacks them. Jean gets put in some bondage gear and becomes, the Black Queen, yells at everyone, sets things on fire, and then turns into the Dark Phoenix. And I think we know how this ends, with Jean on the moon with Scott. And it's one of the most iconic stories in comics. And I don't think a recap does it justice. I think you need to go find these issues and read them.
One of the things that always gets me about the Dark Phoenix saga is that, first of all, how long after the Phoenix saga it is, because you think of them as kind of attached stories, and there's a couple years between them. But second, how early the seeds of it start being sown. I went through this a while ago, and I think the first time, I'm trying to think of the first time that we actually see Mastermind starting to stalk Jean, and it's back in like 125 or something.
Yeah, it's a long thing. It's something that you can tell Claremont and Byrne were building up on this, and for what it's worth, it really worked. I mean, if the Phoenix story was really the first time they got to, or Kant at least, got to kind of push things as a creator with, sending him out into space and the stuff with Eric the Red and all the initial seeds he was pushing. This is the big close of Claremont's, no, I know how to do comics and I'm the biggest thing now. And it works really well. I think what's interesting for me is how it builds up. Because the first 3 issues, reading them again, I was like, okay, these are good, but I don't know if I would put this in all-time greats. Then I moved into the next 3, the Hellfire Club stuff, which has that issue with Wolverine being alone.
Right.
And one of the 2 issues of X-Men that I have signed by Chris Claremont, because that's an issue that has literally changed comics. We talk about the Dark Phoenix Saga ending being a big deal. That turned Wolverine into a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the Hellfire Club section of the, if we're breaking this into the 3 arcs, I think is the most exciting of the 3, because it's kind of shocking to see how successful the White Queen is, first of all, in the first attack in the first arc, but then in the second act, when they actually face off against the Hellfire Club, they take the X-Men down pretty easily. And, it's great to see how they rebound from it, but it does seem as if they really are at the end of their rope. So for them to get through that and then to have the Dark Phoenix pop out and decide to say, hey, I'm hungry, I'm going to go eat a sun, kill some broccoli people, and lead to this like huge climax. This thing flies. And it's so involved and coming back to all of these little points that he'd been, planting along the way. Like this whole bit about spying on the danger room to see what their different powers are and how to react to them. And now they know how to take them out. It's really cool to see all of that come together here.
Yeah, it's if Claremont's got a narrative analog in this story, it's definitely the Hellfire Club. I mean, they've been laying the groundwork of the Dark Phoenix Saga. To say as long as he is kind of ignores the fact that he's the one writing, but it's amazing how much deliberate planning went into this. The thing that blows my mind about the last arc of the Dark Phoenix Saga is the editorial and creative back and forth on it, and how close it came to not ending the way it did, and how much the way it ultimately ended was to fix basically a narrative problem, or a problem that was a result of a mandate from Jim Shooter that Phoenix had to die after what she did. And so everything else was built up to answer to that.
And I think that ending, it works so well. So for the people who may not know the history behind, the inside baseball of Dark Phoenix Saga, it wasn't going to end with Jean dying on the moon. That was not the original plan. It was going to be Jean getting depowered. There's pages that have been released of that being what was going to the printers. Now
she was originally going to die, and then Claremont at the last minute suggested her getting depowered as an alternative.
Okay, that's what got drawn then. Got it.
Yeah.
See, this is why we brought in an expert here to bring in that nice little color. But the that pitch by Claremont got approved by their editor at the time, Jim Salicrup, who then left the book and left Louise Simonson holding the bomb when Jim Shooter found out and said, no, she has to die. She killed a lot of people. We can't have her being a hero. So between Shooter and Claremont and everyone, they were doing this big back and forth and decided, okay, then she has to die.
Which is kind of bonkers if you think about it. Like that kind of moral relativism that, she wiped out this planet, so, we have to get rid of the character is really interesting. Because if you think about the realm of the anti-hero that we have sort of become to live in comics book world, and how we really don't care necessarily when, Bishop is genocidal, we're allowed to hit a reset button on him and say, Bishop's cool again. you don't have an editorial mandate that says, no, that character has to pay for his crimes. But here we found that. And ultimately, I think it makes for a much more satisfying ending.
Yeah, I agree. And it's an ending that creates consequences and ends not only the arc of the Dark Phoenix saga, but in a lot of ways an entire era of X-Men. Like, this
Absolutely.
is the break and sort of the conclusion of kind of the first big Claremont stretch. And when the team picks up again afterwards, like, it's a really different dynamic and it's a really different book and it's telling a really different kind of story.
Well, and Zach, you mentioned this on social media the other day that, the issue with Wolverine and getting him to cut loose and starting to kind of up the ante on the violence in the book really does set a new tone. We've got Kitty coming in too as sort of the POV character, but this idea that the X-Men are going to cut loose a little bit more and not be traditional superheroes along the lines of the Avengers or Fantastic Four, it sets the book apart from the other things that Marvel was publishing at the time. And I think that is a big part of why it was so popular.
And I think for me, one of the things I love about it compared to like the Avengers, or to a lesser extent, the Fantastic Four, this is deep emotional stakes for the X-Men. Yes, end of the day, they have to say, oh, well, she could kind of destroy a lot more suns. But this is more about the X-Men saying, this is our friend. This is someone we have been around for a while. We need to take care of her. We need to help her out. And fighting between that, battling that, it's that found family aspect that you don't get in the Avengers or something like that. It's just, this is not just someone they work with. This is one of their closest people, their most trusted people. And she is uncontrollable at this point. Now, what I really like about it is, Jean's not in this story a lot. Like, the Jean that we have known for the last little while, she really only appears and gets screen time in that last issue in 137. But the Jean we get there is so true. And like, that is forever and ever what the character is going to be. She's, fighting between stuff. She's angry at her situation. She wants to battle against it. But at the end of the day, she's selfless and she's going to do what's right for the people around her and for, everyone to be like a real hero.
Well, it is interesting. One of the things that I'd kind of forgotten about. I mean, I've read this story so many times, but it was remarkable to me how much of the Jason Wingard stuff is in this story. And I know we'd been leading up to it, but it's kind of amazing that there are like these full scenes that take place within the 18th century. And these like pseudo flashback, mind warping things, even to the point where Cyclops has to battle out of his own quote unquote death, after he sword fights, Wingard in this void. It's just interesting that that's such a huge part of this story that also then concludes by fighting on the moon. Like, it's kind of amazing that this story covers so much ground in the issues.
One of the things that's really fascinating about the story, you were talking about it being about the X-Men fighting to protect one of their own, is that it's such a contained story. I mean, it's happening on the astral plane, in the moon, and I really want to make sure that this isn't heavy scare quotes, 18th century. But there aren't really civilians in it. And they're not fighting to protect a world that hates and fears them, and they're not fighting for the cosmos, and they're not fighting against invaders. They're fighting against people who are very specifically coming for them.
Right.
Because they're the X-Men, or who they're going after in context of being the X-Men. And it almost feels private in a way that stories this big very rarely are.
I think an important example of that in the story, and part of this is a plot device, but it works really well. The Avengers do get called about all this stuff, but it's Beast who's sitting there, and he says very specifically, this isn't for them to deal with. They don't get to deal with Jean. I'm going to help the X-Men. It's a very good moment.
Yeah.
Well, and it also gets very personal too. Later on in the story, when we have Jean visiting her family as the Dark Phoenix, and is, trying to explain to them kind of what she is, but can't process it and they're scared out of their minds. Like there's a human level to this, and it speaks to that intimacy that you were talking about, Jay.
Yeah, and it's that way. It's especially that way in the hard scenes, like the extent to which it's about family trauma and loss is really jarring. And especially, I mean, reading this for the first time as a kid and going back to it much older as an adult, I think those dynamics become a lot clearer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially that scene of Jean going back to her parents' house, because I feel like that's a scene that a lot of us going back to this by our 30s have some kind of analog for, if not in our own experiences, then with the people around us and lives and families, of having someone who's violently out of control showing up out of nowhere. And like the weird dynamic of that, and especially the weird dynamic of it being someone who's trying to come back home and obviously trying to establish some kind of normal or some kind of reconnection and can't quite get past that. Like that's a scene that definitely hits a lot harder and a lot differently later.
Well, and I think that speaks really poignantly to the fact that the majority of the story, not only are the X-Men trying to kind of like save and protect Jean, but they're put into multiple situations where they have to be the group that is going to take her down. They have to protect New York from Dark Phoenix, who's, tearing apart Central Park. They have to be the ones ultimately on the moon to say like, hey, maybe we need to take her out. And maybe that's the best thing that we can do for her and for the universe at large. And that's a pretty big statement, to say that the best way to protect this person that we love is maybe not in it's everyone's best interest versus not hers.
It's those really good scenes before the big battle where all of them are conflicted about, like, look, Jean as Phoenix did some horrific things. She's also their friend, and they know there's a lack of control, and they know that this isn't her fault from some points of view. So how do they reconcile that, and where do they stand? And I think those quiet moments are probably the best moments in this book.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that most people consider this the best X-Men story of all time. But before we rank this, I just want to talk to Jay for a second here. I think on a recent episode, you may have said something to the effect that you thought that the Brood Saga was better than this. And I was wondering if you could like elaborate on that a little bit.
So I think especially when you read them in order, the Brood Saga marks a really distinct step in Claremont's ability as a storyteller and the range he's got to work with and the ways that he uses it. And that he and Paul Smith in that story are just incredibly tightly in sync. They're doing things that are medium specific in ways that Claremont especially hasn't up until that point. In terms of just sheer technical storytelling, I think the Brood Saga's tighter.
Okay.
Interesting. Bold.
Like, I don't think it's more iconic. I don't think it's more important. And I don't know if I like it more, but I think it's technically a better story.
I think that's fair. I mean, what you're describing, especially with what, Paul Smith is able to pull off in those last couple of issues of the Brood Saga is pretty impressive. I think that this particular story, it stays with people. Like there is, besides just the shock factor.
There's a reason that this is the story that they have done twice in films, and of the 4, X-Men series, they did it or followed directly from the aftermath of it in 3 of them, and we're planning to do it in the next season of the other one. Like, there's a reason it's this story.
Oh, it is. It's unquestionably the signature X-Men story.
Yeah, I think that it's hard to ignore that. And part of it has to be, the historical idea that this death counted, and it counted for a long time. And it kind of broke a rule that death, I mean, it's not that it has never been done before, but that a death of an important character could matter that much and shock so many people. at the time of publication. And I think that has stood the test of time, even though it's been retconned. But the story itself holds up incredibly well. We can talk a little bit later. I know you wanted to get into the adaptation aspect of this, Zach, when we start talking about the movie later. But, it's not an easy story to interpret.
No.
It's very nuanced. It's very layered, and it's so complicated that I don't envy anybody trying to distill it into something else. But that for that reason alone, it makes it joyous to read it all the time, because it does have so much to offer and has so much to, every page flip is something really, really fun and cool.
The one format the one thing I've always wanted to do, like one of my sort of weird back burner projects, is to write it as a radio drama.
Oh,
to adapt it as a radio drama, because I think I can think of ways that could work as a very direct adaptation of the comic that other media wouldn't necessarily. But that's sort of in the I'm saying it out loud, so now I'm gonna have to do it at some point, or people are gonna start talking.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, I really want to do that eventually.
Oh, that'd be great. I'm just going to put it out there. I think, right now we have Days of Future Past at number 1. I think this should be number 1 on the list. Zach?
I think that we have 231 stories on our list, from currently Days of Future Past all the way down to the Draco, which is not good. I got someone to read Holy War and the Draco today.
Oh God! Why?
Because
who do you have that much against?
I didn't. Okay, listen, you'll appreciate this. Have you heard the fan theory that some people have been yelling incoherently about how the Jonathan Hickman X-Men are going to be living on Mars?
They've been talking about how the X-Men are going to be living on Mars since, what, AVX?
Yes. Well, somebody has been yelling about that a lot. And then somebody decided to put together how there's a red Nightcrawler in one of the stories in Powers of 10, and Nightcrawler was a priest once, so technically they could have a red mask for Mars. Just like the Jonathan Hickman story, because I wanted to make a pun, and that got someone thinking, wait, can Nightcrawler still do mass? And then he had to read all those stories.
Though. Can you guys clarify this for me? Wasn't that an illusion?
Pretty sure that was an illusion.
That's what I thought. I didn't think it was
whether
real.
People remember that it was an illusion varies. So it's been he's been referenced as being ordained at other times, but the one story where it's actually discussed and confirmed, it's as an illusion. It's one of those details that's handled really inconsistently, sort of like Bobby Drake's religion.
Yeah,
that makes me feel better. I didn't remember that incorrectly. All right,
it's a bad story, Adam, and we haven't gotten to the Holy War yet. Thank the maker, but
it's coming.
Yeah. So I'm looking at our top 10 right here. The number 10 is the bar story where Colossus and Juggernaut get into a fight. It's a very good standalone.
That's the one that has the that was my Sunday punch line.
Yes.
Yes.
Then above that, we've got the Dark Angel Saga from Uncanny X-Force, which I think this is better than.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Well, and also I feel like this automatically gets a seat above that just because that's so heavily
influenced
referential to this. I mean, it's an amazing story in its own right, but it's a story that would not and could not exist or have the impact it does without the callbacks to the Dark Phoenix Saga.
Right. 8, we've got Messiah Complex. 7, we've got Worst X-Man Ever, which, man, we really liked. I need to reread that again to make sure I still like that as much as I thought I did.
It holds up. It's freaking awesome.
6 is Riot at Xavier's. Number 5 is the Claremont Miller Wolverine. 4 is X-Men New Mutants Asgard War.
Woohoo.
Interesting.
Personal fave.
Adam loves it a lot. And you think this is better than that, Adam?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
I think this is better than Gifted.
I do too.
And
I think as with the Dark Angel Saga, the Whedon run is so heavily informed by and building on the foundation of this stuff that it's hard to rank it relative.
Yeah, that's true.
Honestly, I think shocking no one, Dark Phoenix Saga is our new number one on this list.
I think it has to be.
It was inevitable. I mean, that's why we waited nearly 100 episodes. We didn't lead with it.
Well, people have been asking us, like, why isn't Dark Phoenix Saga your number one? And the reason is we haven't talked about it. So now we've talked about it. And
So-
there you go, guys.
One thing I want to put in perspective,
Yes.
just from a timing standpoint, it's within a 12-month period that Dark Phoenix Saga, Days of Future Past, and God Loves Man Kills come out. Does anyone have a better year?
Wow. That is nuts.
That's ridiculous.
Isn't that crazy?
That was 1981?
Like 81, 82, because God Loves Man Kills is the end of that. And that came out still within 12 months of the end of Dark Phoenix, at least.
Yeah, I know
Holy
I
cow.
know the Brood Saga is 82, and I know it for the stupidest reason ever, which is that Miles and I decided that there was an X-Men equivalent to like birth year horoscopes.
Okay.
Wherein your X sign was what was based on the story arc that came out when you were born, and mine is Brood Saga.
Oh, I love that.
So that's fall 82.
Oh my
Mine
God.
is Mutant Genesis, and that's a pretty strong one.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's on our list. So we wanted to talk about some of the sort of like ancillary stuff that goes around Dark Phoenix. So what else did we pick here to talk about, Zach? Because we got some kind of interesting, weird things here.
We did. I know we actually batted back and forth what we wanted to pair Dark Phoenix with because it is such a big story.
Mhm.
And one of the things I said, well, Claremont likes Dark Phoenix. What would he pair it with? And what he chose was a backup story in Classic X-Men 43. Now, Classic X-Men, for the first 43 issues, did like 10-page backups that sometimes tied in with the stories that they were attached to and sometimes didn't.
Mhm.
This one definitely does. This is by Claremont with Mike Collins and Joe Rubenstein. And it's interesting what happens here because this takes place right at the end of Dark Phoenix Saga.
Well, this is a really strange sort of little existential short story that we get here of Jean experiencing something after death. And I think it's notable that like we're in sort of the latter section of these backup stories. I've spoken on the show many times about my reverence for these backup stories, especially the early ones with John Bolton doing the art. I absolutely love them. I don't always love the stories and like what they're saying or what they're trying to retcon, but a lot of them have so much heart to them. But this is the reprint in Classic X-Men of the final issue of the Dark Phoenix Saga. And we have Jean appearing in sort of this otherworldly realm in space with basically one of the Property Brothers from HGTV. Who, and we always talk about Thanos being in love with death, and she always appears as like sexy skeleton lady. But this time it's a dude with a tank top and a bandana around his neck with eye beams.
He's much more in the spirit of the cowboy who Daniel Moonstar occasionally runs into.
He's very in the spirit of that cowboy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they kind of have a chat. I don't know.
They just kind of talk while building a building of death.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's death. I think that he's asking her to confront whether, she is an agent of death. I don't know. It's such a strange thing. I mean, I wonder what Claremont was really going for with this particular little addendum here. It's very odd.
What year did Classic X-Men 43 come out?
90, I think.
Okay, so this was well after the Phoenix retcon, so he would have known when he wrote this that this is Phoenix and not Jean who's having this conversation.
Which makes the line where he straight says that Jean in this says, no, that wasn't some sort of duplicate. That wasn't anything. That was all me making all those decisions. That seems like Claremont's still hating that decision for the retcon.
Kind of. It pairs so interestingly with the What If issues which came out around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at that, Yeah, it's weird. This is the first appearance of White Phoenix, right?
Yeah, this is I guess as Grant Morrison would call her, the White Phoenix of the Crown, which is a very good name.
Yes. So that raises a question, and I was thinking about this while I was reading it and didn't really come up with a solid answer, which is whether this takes place in the White Hot Room.
I want to say it didn't at the time because that wasn't a concept, but now
Right.
it super does. Like I've got to imagine that was something that Morrison, when he was doing what research he did, saw that, liked the idea of, hey, there's a place that the Phoenix goes, and picked up on that. I think that's a really interesting thread. So I've always said that this is the first appearance of the White Hot Room because, who's going to stop me?
Yeah, I mean, it's not clear that that's, it's not like Claremont's creating that concept here, but it does match that pretty precisely, I think.
No, it would be the first appearance of what was later retconned to have been the White Hot Room.
Yeah. Yep.
Comics, everybody.
Yeah, comics, everybody. So yeah, I mean, this is an interesting sort of, Claremont looking back retrospectively on the ending and, what Jean was all about, what the Dark Phoenix was all about. And it's, I don't know if I would call it essential.
Yeah, is it good is the real question. Because I don't know how I feel about this.
It's more interesting than good.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement.
It does some stuff. It's a nice little coda. I can see it as, trying to add a happier ending to this as a reprint book, especially this being the last of the vignettes that they would do. But I don't think it works great as a story.
Well, it's tricky because
weird.
Yeah, the character of Death in this, these couple pages just really isn't all that interesting, and they're sort of throwing platitudes back and forth at each other and talking about this, kind of existential crisis of being the Phoenix. But I don't know that anything is really resolved here.
There's also no real reason for it to be a comic.
No.
Like, it feels like someone took what was supposed to be a short story, just a prose short story, and gave it comics trappings, but the medium just doesn't really do anything for it.
Yeah, I mean, even sure, they have a conversation while he's tentatively building a building, but there's no movement, no action, nothing more than a conversation in this. I get the metaphor, but
there's nothing that the visuals do that couldn't be done as efficiently or better with text. It's not, there are stories where not a lot happens and where there's nothing spectacular that are fun. There are quiet stories that are really good as comics. And this just feels like a weird fit for the medium.
Well, especially because the symbolism involved here is kind of mixed. We have all of this symbolism of him building and her building, but the story begins and ends with a playing card motif, which why he has the cards, why they are showcasing elements of her life. And especially the last page of this, which is really like a quick montage, 9 panels of Madeline Pryor in Sinister's lab, is just I don't know, none of it really fits really well to me.
So I think that would fit better if you were reading classic X-Men at the time, because he was doing a lot of work setting up Sinister and some of this stuff that was going on with Inferno, because this would have happened the year after Inferno or around the same time.
Right.
So this would have been trying to be contemporaneous with that. But yeah, I think as a standalone coda to this, doesn't work incredibly well.
No, it's like he's trying to draw a straight line between some of these different events he's done, and it just, I just don't think it's successful.
It's Donnie Darko director's cut syndrome.
Oh,
sometimes it's better when you don't explain it.
100% agree on that one.
Now we have a couple other quiet issues on this list, and I'm looking around at them. At 163, we got Wolverine Volume 3, Number 6, the one where Wolverine and Nightcrawler talk at a bar, and the cover has Nightcrawler looking a little horny.
That's the beer bottle on the table issue, right?
That's the beer bottle on the table issue.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sadra Beach. I don't know. I don't think this is as good as that. I mean,
I
that,
don't think it's as good.
yeah, this has a certain level of like illogic to it that I don't think is helping it very much. So
Is it better or worse than number 182, Generation X 63, Monet Vampire Hunter?
oh man,
That has a title going for it.
It's a very
That's
good
true.
title. It's a boring story, but it's a good title.
I'm gonna have to basically bow out of that ranking because I'm not conversant enough with Generation X to make a solid call.
Here's the thing. Generation X rules.
No, I know that.
The entire
arc
way. Larry Hama does some Larry Hama stuff, which means it's very good or very bad and nowhere in between. Let's see. What else is on this? Oh, you know what? Is this better or worse than Spider-Man Team Up number 1, the one that we keep forgetting happened?
Where do we have that as? Oh, 200? Yeah. We're definitely in the right realm. You know, like this has about as much impact as that Cable and Wolverine Mignola homage from Marvel Team Up.
It's not as bad as 203 I Lucifer.
No.
From the Silver Age.
And it's not as character assassin-y as IVX.
That's fair. Is it better or worse than the New Mutants era of Fall of the Mutants? Which, fun fact, was the first episode of Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men that I had a question answered on.
Oh, well, congratulations to you.
I know, I'm very proud.
Do you remember what it was?
I have literally no idea, Jay. That was like 4 years ago.
Oh man, now I want to dig through because I've got all of the outlines still.
I would say that Doug dying.
It was about the third Summers brother. It's very on brand for me to ask an Adam X based question, isn't it? Dang. Dang, man.
I'm gonna put Fall of the Mutants, New Mutants ahead of this.
Yeah,
I just think that it has more resonance and it means more, even if it's not a great story.
I can't put it below IVX.
No.
IVX has got a couple of good issues, but boy, howdy, does it kind of fumble there at the end.
It is problematic. So is this our new 202?
This is our new 202, Classic X-Men 43.
Nice.
And the last one we wanted to talk about was a couple of what if issues. This is what if Jean Grey had never died and what if Phoenix had rose again? It's a two-parter what if, which is kind of an oddity with that line, but I really like the space that it gives this story.
The first one stands alone pretty well. It can end at the end of the first part, but the second one is the one that I think is more interesting by a pretty wide margin.
Now it's credited as the first issue being a plot by Claremont, though I think that's because the first 6 pages are just the Dark Phoenix saga again. And then
I was gonna say I don't think he's actively involved in the creation of this comic book, but they still credit him that way.
Well, then because they used the psychic lobotomy option,
right? Yep.
And then George Caragone does the plotting and scripting for both issues. Rod Ramos on pencils. Jan Anton Harps on inks for the first issue 32. And Jimmy Palmiotti on inks for 33. He would go on to do many things.
Yeah. And this is actually, I always find this interesting. This is the second time that What If has done What If Phoenix Had Lived, because in volume 1 they did it. They did a story of it. It's not the same story, but it ended with Phoenix basically just eating the earth. And this goes in a very different direction.
This one does something that not a lot of other stories that look at what ifs with Phoenix do, which is acknowledge that at this point the Phoenix isn't Jean. And the point that comes at the end of the first half is Mastermind attempting to murder Jean, who at that point is depowered, and not being able to, or her coming back with the realization that, oh no, she's not Jean, she's Phoenix.
Right.
And going and in a moment of sort of intense indecision, basically accidentally destroying Jean Grey's body and continuing to live but with the knowledge that she is actually Phoenix.
Yeah, it's a cool moment.
It's a hell of a twist to the story, and it's not only a hell of a twist to the story, but it's a hell of a subversion of Jean's original death and the way that worked around it. You know, the mandate that Phoenix had to die because of this, and the only way Jean could come back was if Jean and Phoenix were separate. Having Phoenix survive, destroy Jean, and then go on to basically be a fundamentally positive force and really struggle with that and have that moral reckoning on her own is a totally different direction than any other interpretation of the story has gone. And one of the things it does is put Jean at the center of the story in terms of perspective, not just focus, which is great. I mean, I'm on record as one of the stories that I tend to like best about Jean Grey are the ones that, instead of making her be the character who everyone is looking at, have her be the character through whom we're seeing everything else. But yeah, it's a really interesting story.
I like the setup of that, and I like the payoff because, you know, once you have Jean, you know, Phoenix, we're going to call her Phoenix when we're talking about the Phoenix Force Jean version and not the one in Jamaica Bay, because I've just realized how difficult that will be to disambiguate for someone who hasn't read this story. But you know, when Phoenix goes and finds Jean's body in Jamaica Bay and makes that decision to say, no, I'm going to be Jean now.
Yeah, she doesn't even do it consciously. She doesn't destroy it consciously. But
Right.
she does consciously decide to keep on living as Jean.
Right. Once you get past that point, you can have Phoenix go in a direction that's a bit more intense, a bit different than I think most people would expect Jean to go with. You get a point where there is an anti-mutant, politician that Jean has him change his mind.
She does this secretly, though, too, because all of the other X-Men still think that she's completely depowered.
Right. So she's living this like secret life, and you get a lot of this internal conflict. You get the conflict that you're supposed to get in like a good adaptation of the Phoenix saga, where it's like what's going on internally with her. You get to see that actually play out in a way that has real consequences that aren't immediately going to turn her into a, star-eating firebird. Like, you get to see that slow progression, even if it's only over 2 issues, and it works real well.
And she doesn't lose it again. I think that's one of the most interesting parts of it. Is she eventually leaves Earth at the end of the second issue. She says, "Yeah, I can't do this. I need to go off and be in the cosmos because honestly, this power level is too big for something terrestrial. Got to go before I destroy everything." But she never fully loses control. Like, she kills a couple people deliberately. Mm-hmm. And in fairly justified circumstances. She takes out the Shadow King at one point. There's
fair. Guy's a jerk.
There is one of my favorite moments in the second part of the story is when Wolverine does the "I gotta kill you for the good of everything," and it just doesn't take. And she's like, nope, sorry, Phoenix.
Well, I was going to say, I think a huge part of these 2 issues, and Jay, you've already insinuated this, is that it's all about Jean's agency.
Yeah.
The story in the first issue begins with Magneto wanting to give Jean back her powers and to harness the energy of the Phoenix. Doesn't work out. Mastermind comes back, and we realize very quickly the Mastermind is being controlled by Shadow King. Doesn't work out. Wolverine is going to try and take her out because he knows that she's the Phoenix, and we've run in this scenario before. Doesn't take. So and eventually she gets ownership of herself, even by destroying the body that's in Jamaica Bay, and eventually frees herself from Earth.
But not without facing the consequences of like her having massive power. You get the same dynamic because she kind of causes a Days of Future Past, not intentionally, but she starts the dominoes down that path. Which that's a very good comic book thing where you think the what ifs about one thing and it turns out, oh no, it's like 3 other things too.
Yeah.
Love it. It's like playing a greatest hits album.
No, I was going to say, I appreciate that, when we've talked about what ifs in the past, inevitably what ifs always end with like the end of the world. I mean, almost inevitably, like the world is
everyone
over.
dies.
Everyone always dies.
Easy out.
And what's cool about this one is that it works in little pieces of continuity, like what they do with Rachel. They're incorporating some of the 90s costumes into this storyline, which is interesting. You get this really great cameo of Destiny throughout the story. And I don't know, it's kind of fresh in that way. It's retelling the canon in a new way that's fun.
it also leaves us with a world that I really want more stories set in.
Oh yeah.
This sort of not exactly post Days of Future Past, but Jean triggers the rise of the Sentinels, but also takes them down, and ultimately some of the X-Men are alive, but not the same ones. And Rachel is about 6 or 7, and Scott's raising her. And also by partway through the second half, they all know she's Phoenix and not the original Jean.
And they're not like good with it, but they've accepted it.
Yeah, well, they get that she's the person they've been living alongside, and however this thing works out, however complicatedly this works out, she's still, it's not pretty and it's not pleasant, but it's also not cut and dried that she's an imposter just because she's not exactly what she was claiming to be.
Yeah, Scott goes so far to say that, it matters that you're still the woman I married, the mother of my child, whatever you are, I will always love you. And I think that that's important. Like, it addresses the retcon, but also realistically says this is the character that they went through those experiences with. So you can't just ignore that.
Well, and this is a man who is canonically very chill about his wife growing spontaneous tentacles.
That is true.
Yes. I like that it's just that refreshing thing, because you think the entire story, because they build it up like with Rachel having these weird thoughts and feelings about her not being her mom and all this stuff, and you think that that's going to be like the crux point, that's going to turn it into, okay, and now the world's on fire and everything's bad, and it doesn't. And I like that subversion. It's really refreshing.
I do wish that we had maybe a different art team on these. I mean, what if never? It's usually like a proving ground for artists. They're not putting like top tier people on this, and Rod Ramos is doing a fine job. The storytelling is good on this, but it's clearly not like upper echelon Marvel art on these two issues. And I think that if it had maybe a next level artist on this, it could really sell it even more than it does.
God, can you imagine the John Bolton version of this?
Oh my God.
It'd be very good.
That would be crazy, right? It really could use something like that. It doesn't necessarily take away from the story, but I just think, it could be better if it had that extra push. But I think this is good. We've talked about some very bizarre what if stuff before. We have a couple of them on our list. The worst of which is down at 226, which was what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires during Inferno,
which is this is better than that.
Is very, very bad.
It's not better than what if Wolverine was just regular Lord of the Vampires at 47. It's between those two.
Yeah, at 47 we have what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires, and at 117
I love that issue.
We have what if the X-Men stayed in Asgard, which is a cool follow-up.
Better than
Asgard.
The Asgard one.
I agree.
The Asgard one is fun moments, and it's a nice little what if normally is and what you enjoy about them. But this, I was really enjoying how the story was progressing and some of the swerves that it took. What I think is similar on this list. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I don't think it's better than what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires, though.
Very few things are.
That is such a ridiculously over-the-top story that's so much fun. So
it's got one of my all-time favorite first-page lines, which is, vampires may already be in control of America's nuclear arsenal. like that's where they're starting from.
Yeah.
I think we had this
to Doctor Strange Punisher. It's worth your time.
We had this argument when we first talked about that issue, and I'm still trying to figure out how straight was Roy Thomas actually playing this, because I can't tell. I can't tell if that's just he saying we're starting from here and we're running with it, or if he knew what he was doing. Because with Roy, I could see it go both ways.
That's kind of the beauty of Roy Thomas. You can never be entirely certain there.
What I think this is oddly similar to, Adam and Jay. I'm just used to saying Adam because normally there's just two of us. That's how it works. I'm putting too much thought into that one specific phrasing. But number 97 is Jean Grey 8 through 11 Psych Wars with Hopeless, and I forget who the artist on that one was.
Is it Perez? No. I'd have to look it up. I
can see that.
I don't know. I think this It's so interesting. Like, this is such a weird story. It's not necessary, but it has a great deal of depth. And if you're an X-Men fan, you're gonna like love the little call outs that you get throughout this story. It's far more in context with, like, did you guys read Battle World? What was it?
Years of Future Past?
Years of Future Past? Like, I almost get that kind of a vibe from this, you know?
I think this is better than that. The thing the two stories that I'm looking for on your ranking that I don't think are there, which are unfortunate because they're the ones I'd put it with, are the Trial of Jean Grey arc and Phoenix Resurrection.
Phoenix Resurrection is on our list. It's lower.
It is?
It's a lot lower.
Okay,
than
I'm text searching for Resurrection and not finding it.
That's fine. There's like a non-insignificant chance I misspelled Resurrection on this list.
Oh no, I see it. It's 124.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's similar to Phoenix Resurrection, but I have some specific qualms about how Phoenix Resurrection runs, in so much as I think the inconsistency in the art team really holds it back, and I think that I don't think it fully pays off on the setup of the first few issues. I generally like the story, but I think if I'm looking at this, I don't think this is better than 81, which is Murder at the Mansion.
Nope.
It's probably better than that time the X-Men met Santa Claus before he sent them out into space to give Jean Phoenix powers.
The 1991 Marvel Holiday Special.
At number 88 right now, yes.
I don't know if I would put it ahead of 86, which is Uncanny 143, which is the Christmas demon story.
No, I don't think it's that high.
No. But is it better than All New Wolverine Annual 1, which is the body swap between Laura Kinney and Gwen Stacy?
Spider-Gwen. The character that my 3-year-old thinks is the better Spider-Man, which is not a bad thing. It's just a wild world that I live in.
That's terrific, though.
That's awesome.
It's very good, but I bought Spider-Gwen's first appearance just off the shelf, so it's weird to me to think that, oh yeah, the fruit of my loins, loves this character.
They're becoming the relevant generation. Eventually we're gonna be the weird old people who remembered Spider-Man mostly as married.
Yeah.
See, I don't want to be old though. I don't want to grow up. It's so rough.
Too late, Zach.
They've already passed me. There's other generations who are doing things now. I don't like it. I want people to still complain about millennials, damn it.
Oh, they do. That's the bizarre part. And we're all in our late 30s.
Do you know how young Zach is, Jay?
12, 15?
Adam, 27. Let's not get into it. But is it better? Is it better than the Wolverine and Spider-Gwen body swap story?
I'm gonna say yes. I think that
so.
There's more going on here, but I would say 86 is probably my ceiling, just because that is a really great standalone issue with Kitty running through the mansion, and it's really cool. It's classic.
I think that seals it. Then this is our new number 87. What if Phoenix 32 and 33?
Nice.
And that was fun. Now we got Jay on, and we want to, just as we wrap up this episode, talk about in 4 days from now, there's a Dark Phoenix movie coming out. Jay, what are your thoughts on that? Because I've got thoughts.
I think by the time this episode goes up, I will have seen it, because I'm going to a review screening next Monday.
Nice.
Because I'm reviewing it for Polygon. So I did a really good job of having no expectations for this for a really long time, and then the teaser trailer, or the trailer that was attached to Endgame came out, and I saw it. Yeah, so I don't know what to think about this, because I'm really done with the Fox X-Men movies. I've been done with the Fox X-Men movies basically since after the second one. And I left Avengers Endgame mostly just feeling really relieved. It's okay, that's done. And I am sort of expecting that that's the way I'm going to feel coming out of this. What I just, man, I don't want to have hopes and expectations for this. I try really hard not to. And then I can just go in, watch it, see it for what it is, enjoy what I enjoy, and leave. But it seems like they get the scale of Phoenix
Mm-hmm.
in ways that, well, I mean, X-Men 3 obviously didn't, but in ways that are important to the Phoenix Saga working. And they get the scale of Phoenix outside of, but as connected to Jean. And I really love Sophie Turner as Jean Grey. I think that's brilliant casting. She's done an amazing job so far.
Oh yeah.
So I'm really, really excited to see her in this and to see her play Jean and Phoenix through the Dark Phoenix Saga. Like that's going to be I think that's going to be pretty tremendous no matter what else happens in the movie.
Yeah, that's pretty much my exact expectation at this point too. It's, you know what? By the end of Game of Thrones, Sophie Turner was the only actress that I cared about. Member of the entire cast, to be honest. So I want to see her do really well in this. And I love this story, but we'll see.
She plays a Jean who's eerie in ways that I think she needs to be and almost never is.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, seeing where that goes, like when she actually gets to let go as Dark Phoenix is going to be neat.
You guys are being really positive. I am impressed.
You got to try positivity, man. You got to just go in with hope.
I'm just talking about the parts I'm excited about. I'm really worried that it's going to be the equivalent of X-Men 3 Women, Am I Right?
Well, I mean, having just recently watched a little bit of Last Stand, I think it was on Sci-Fi the other night, and I was like, wow, this is a real train wreck. And the fact that we've given the keys back to the screenwriter of The Last Stand and let him write and direct this thing, it has me worried. I think rereading the book over the last couple of days has really made me just outright curious. You know, so I'm putting two different things together here. I mentioned earlier in the show how I'm always just absolutely stymied as to how anybody even would approach this in terms of adapting it into another medium, because there's so much going on. And what are different readers thinking are the important threads that they should put into an X-Men movie or converting it into an animated show or something like that. The animated series, I guess, had the option of just being literal, whereas other media have had to kind of distill it into something else. So I'm really just curious going in, like, what is it going to be? And am I going to see something that is, connected mildly? Are they making interesting choices? Very interested to see what Chastain's character is all about. Just how are they even approaching it? But as many people who, listen to this show know, I was no fan of X-Men Apocalypse. I was actively angry leaving the theater. So I'm really hoping that I don't have that same feeling, and that I can have a good time at the movies.
The big test in this, and the thing that I think I've given up on, like, I will be stunned if it accomplishes this, is sticking to the landing of the Dark Phoenix Saga in a non-serial context. Because you mentioned the animated series, and so much of what makes the Dark Phoenix Saga work is the build-up, is the fact that it's coming at the end of this incredibly long game. Even if you drop into it, like, I feel like you can pick it up and read it and still get that impact from 137, but it's with the understanding that it's of what it's building on and how deliberately and over how much time that was built. And that's not the case in the movies. We had a Phoenix Flare moment in Apocalypse.
Right.
But Apocalypse was a mess of a movie.
It sure was 2 hours of film.
Well, and Apocalypse is essentially another origin movie,
Yeah.
Like X-Men Apocalypse ends with the X-Men becoming the X-Men for the first time. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to go in with an open mind. I hope you guys enjoy it, or get something out of it, or even if it's a Wolverine Origins type mess, that it has value.
Look. If it's as bad as X-Men Origins Wolverine in the ways that X-Men Origins Wolverine is bad, I will be very happy leaving the theater.
Yeah, we're going to be enjoying ourselves.
That's. But would it be? I feel like that would maybe be the Curse of the Mutants movie.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Please let us have that one day.
That's the Dracula, or that's Wolverine, Lord of the Vampires, the movie. It's no matter what, whether it's good or bad, I'm going to be interested in seeing how they do it. Like that's at this point,
Yes.
that's what I go to X-Men movies for is to see how they approach these iconic moments and stories and characters and the weight of the expectations. It's a lot of the same things that I read the comics for.
Yep. Yep. I can appreciate that. Oh, so we'll see how it goes, guys. I think as we wrap up, the first thing I want to do is say, Jay, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a ton of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. This was really, really fantastic to get to revisit and talk about this. And you guys are awesome. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on.
Thanks, Jay.
No problem. Now, if people want more of your brand of X-Men analysis, what should they do?
Well, you can find us at Explain the X-Men with no beginning E, so just Explain the X-Men. Pretty much everywhere. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, your friendly neighborhood podcatcher. You can also listen to our episodes directly at our website, which is just explainthexmen.com. And no matter how you spell that, it'll redirect to us, as does petercorbo.com.
Oh, really? That's
it
great.
It does. I keep on meaning to put something there, or just like to get someone to draw a beach pinup of him. And it's just hangs out there. But no, right now it just redirects to the podcast. And we are Explain the X-Men on Twitter and Tumblr. And there is also a Mutant Revolution Discord, which is currently, I think, on pause as far as invitations, but periodically invites new folks, and which actually is sort of a joint project. Zach is one of the admins there too.
It's true.
And yeah, we have good folks. And I think the next convention we're going to be is FlameCon. So yeah, come to that. It's great.
That is awesome. Guys, seriously, check out Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men. It's the podcast that is the reason why this podcast exists. I think that's true for Adam and me.
That's very true.
Speaking of this podcast, if you liked it, you can go on over to XavierFiles.com. That's where I have all the latest and greatest in X-Men news, reviews, wild mass guesses about very dumb things. Has been my brand recently. I've just kind of leaned into it. You can also go to twitter.com and look for @XavierFiles. If you like the show, you can go to patreon.com/XavierFiles. You toss in a couple bucks a month. We do an entire episode crafted around one of your suggestions. Just like next week, how we're doing a thing about the X-Babies, which it's going to be a whole something different than what we talked about this week.
I'm excited for that.
Adam, what are you up to? Where can people find you?
All right, guys, you can always follow me on Twitter at Arthur Stacy. I've got new pages of Bish and Jubes, the Cross-Time Conundrum, coming out every Monday at adamrec.tumblr.com. And if you want art in your inbox every day from yours truly, you can head over to patreon.com/adamrec. And I just want to take a second, Jay, to thank you. It's really an honor having you on the show. Like Zach said, I don't think we'd be doing this show. I don't even know if I would have been doing Bish and Jubes without you and Miles getting me so back into the X-Men. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for all of that. I think I've told you this in person, but I just wanted to reiterate it on air.
Thank you. And I can't tell you how much it means to hear that. I mean, we started the show because we really love this thing and we like talking about a thing that we love, making it accessible and connecting to other people who like it. So the fact that it's not only brought people, but like branched off and become this amazing fractal network of people making cool X-Men stuff is the most amazing outcome I think neither of us could have anticipated.
Yeah, it rules. And I think we're all happy about that.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess I already dropped the spoiler that next week we talk about X-Babies.
X-Babies.
Which, man, I still can't, when I looked it up, I forgot. I can't believe what a tonal shift that's going to be. But we'll make that work. Until then, guys, this has been Battle of the Atom, and we hope you survived the experience.
Get it!